we continue with our best practices of responsible tourism track. And now we will have a live discussion. It will a live panel discussion on human rights, because ITB is actively committed to support human rights in tourism and to support projects which significantly contribute to advocate human rights and foster acceptance, diversity, and inclusion. So today, our subject in the ITB Human Rights in Tourism series will be multiple experiences of discrimination and inequality in tourism and how to fight it. So we have invited some awesome experts who will discuss how these structural fallacies can actually be overcome. So a warm welcome, first of all, to all our distinguished panelists. Nice to have you. First, we have Stephanie Jones from Washington, D.C. She's the owner of Cultural Heritage Alliance Tours and also the founder and CEO of the National Blacks in Travel and Tourism Collaborative. And she's also a United States Travel and Tourism Advisory Board member. She developed a website aimed at matching Black professionals with tourism business opportunities, the Black Tourism Talent Directory. Hello, Stephanie. Thank you for being with us. Then we have,
hello.
Then we have also from the US, but from Chicago, not from Washington, Sandi Robinson. Sandi is Area Director of Sales and Marketing at the Godfrey Hotel and the Essex Hotel of the Oxford Hotels and Resorts Group. She's already received many awards as Director of Sales and Marketing of the Year, Women in Excellence in 2018, and she has already more than 20 years also experience in the hospitality industry. And she's also a co-founder of a local nonprofit called She Gives Back, which supports homeless residents, youth teachers, and low-income families. And she's a board member of the IGLTA, the International Gay and Lesbian Travel Association. Next, we have from Italy, Iaia Pedemonte. She's the founder and editor of Gender Responsible Tourism Association, GRT, and she has a diploma in development and international cooperation in gender empowerment strategies, post-crisis reconstruction, and communication. And she has worked as an UNDP volunteer in several field projects, and she has written countless articles, and always dealing with sustainable tourism, and she has edited a Independent Women Travelers Guide. Hello, Iaia.
Hello.
And from Germany, last not least, but actually from Spain, I think you're in Spain right now, right? Is Tobias Sauer.
Spain, yes.
Tobias looks very fresh, I can say, but already he's a long-time veteran in LGBT journalism. He was born in Wiesbaden in Germany and studied media studies, political sciences, as well as history and social anthropology. And he lives in Berlin when he's not traveling, and as a freelance journalist, he mainly writes about travel, about life in Europe, about German foreign policy, but also about Berlin city life, like for Siegessäule, which is one of the most important queer city magazines in Berlin. So after the 2020 events, once again, it was brought to the table, it is important to speak up, also if it comes to racism. Remaining silent is always wrong, in personal life and in each tourism branch as well. So tourism stands for, as a force for good, for broadening your horizon and against bigotry. Tourism is in its essence means to embrace a diverse planet, learning, respecting, and admiring. So tourism, I think, surely can play a role in fighting discrimination and inequality. Let me just go into a quick introduction. There are multiple discrimination experiences in tourism, whether it's the travelers who are being discriminated or the hosts who are being discriminated in their own society living in a destination, or it's the members of the tourism industry who are being discriminated in their workplace by being denied access or advancement. So people are discriminated against for the color of their skin, for ethnic or social background, their sexual orientation, gender, their medical condition, disability, age, religion, body, style. So throughout the world, because that's not only happening in one part of the world, that's happening throughout the world, to discriminate others seems to be a negative human phenomenon, which can be defined as a readiness to look down on others in order to raise your own self-esteem. And this malicious human flaw leads to racism, to homophobia, to fantasy of superiority, and final structural racism through the years. And the reasons why humans feel the need to discriminate others are, of course, insecurity, weakness, pride, wrong pride. You know, a sense of superiority is born out of historic and social structures, of course, and the brutal colonial history plays a huge role, of course. But people are scared of what is different. So nobody is born with connotations and stereotypes in mind. We all learn about different stereotypes from our families, the media, school, environment. But the way that people around a child treat stereotypes directly affects the way that children will handle stereotypes as an adult. So it's so important to bring up children the right way. You know, people who discriminate against others have taken their beliefs of stereotypes to a level that causes them to think that others are not equal to them. So human rights and tourism, as well as religious beliefs sometimes, veto discrimination. So structural racism and the idea of supremacy are deep-seated in our societal structures, which were shaped by historical and social structures of power, and they manifest themselves in the unequal distribution of resources, of social, political, economic, and cultural means. So whether consciously or unconsciously, these structures have an immense influence on individuals and institutions. So I want to pose my first question now directly to Tobias. Tobias, where would you see structural interconnections between the various forms of discrimination? I mean, discrimination because of racism, homophobia, because of gender. Where would you see those interconnections? Are there interconnections?
Well, you'd like to start with the difficult question in the beginning, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure there could be books written about that topic. But well, as you pointed out in your question already, I think one of the bases behind this is probably an unquestioned idea of what is maybe normal and what is not normal in a society, and probably there is a emotional reaction to what seems to be unnormal. And sometimes that, I think, can take forms like hate, or I don't know, or any other negative reactions, probably. So I think one of these ideas of what is normal is probably being heterosexual, at least in our societies, and so there are probably other ideas like gender roles come to mind easily. So if you're a CEO or something, probably the stereotype still is that's mostly a man and not a woman. So I think there would be gender roles who play into this as well. But yeah, probably there are some differences as well. I think these are different categories, the one you mentioned, and probably they change over time and they change from place to place. And I don't think they're necessarily connected at all places and at all times. So if we want to analyze them and maybe tackle them as well, I think they should be analyzed at least differently. And probably there's not a one-size-fits-all solution to these issues.
Yeah, thank you. I will just go on asking you. Sometimes people always say, "Oh, it's unintentional. I didn't mean to do that. I'm not a racist. I'm not homophobe, but." You know, so do you think this is dangerous? How can we fight ignorance? Because those people don't really want to hurt you, but they're ignorant in a way. How can we fight ignorance?
Well, is it dangerous? I think the unintended discrimination most of the time is probably annoying, can be very annoying. Might be, if we're talking about discrimination against LGBT people, might be bad for business. If you run a hotel, for example, and you just assume all your customers are heterosexual couples, and you put on those nice little slippers and there's written on him and her on them in front of the bed, then maybe you don't make your customers happy and they probably don't come back and choose a different hotel next time. The bigger problem and the more dangerous problem, I think, is conscious discrimination. And that we have in some states, some countries where there are fines against LGBT people, where there's arrests, possible imprisonment in some countries, even corporal punishments like flogging or even the death penalty. So this is, I think, really the most dangerous form of discrimination. You said, right, how can we fight it? So the problem is who is we? I think it's hard to say globally, but one starting point would be, and that probably goes for all forms of discrimination, I would say, listen to NGOs or other people who really deal with it every day and have a lot of experience. And it's, I think, also important to be aware that we all have prejudices and biases, unconsciously or consciously. And then if you listen to those who sometimes suffer or at least deal with these discriminations and they ask you for help, maybe provide the help. I think that would be a good idea. Or like one recent example here in Berlin, for example, is the local DMO. They just did a campaign on LGBT tourism, and they invited very consciously like local LGBT people. So they didn't set it up from the top without any connection to LGBT people on the ground, but they really worked together. And I think that is one possibility to go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Tobias. Yeah, you talked about NGOs playing a big role. So I would like to jump to Iaia now, because she is the founder of the Gender Responsible Tourism Association, and this is also an NGO. So can you please let us know why did you found it? What was when did you found it, and why? I mean, what was the reason behind it?
Okay. Yes, hello everybody. So I started Gender Responsible Tourism just because I am a journalist and I was traveling and I was meeting so many women. So I just started interviewing them, and little by little I built a website interviewing experts and so both women on the field and experts, and then travelers as well. And so it has become a guide. It has become a place where you can find places where women are organizing things in tourism if you want to travel. And then we were also connected with the resources of UNWTO to begin with. And then it has become a place where we try, one way or another, with all our initiatives, to send as many tourists as we can, where there are women working in tourism in a sustainable way, from managers to chefs to guides, etc. And last year, when I was writing a guidebook about traveling, visiting women and for women travelers, the most moving and emotional thing was to find out how much women are resilient, and they were really making all kinds of initiatives to keep working, even though we were in the crisis already. So it has been very interesting to see how many stories they have and to discover the stories that you can find even without going there, but just reading about them. And then anyway, when Rika asked me to attend to this today, and you can show the slide number 2 and number 2, 1 and 2 if you want, if you can. When Rika asked me to attend today, I tried to pick up the most current cases and I interviewed those who work in the field and who study to combine the theme of human rights and gender and tourism. And I can say that today, with more association, with Equality in Tourism, that we will also launch a call to action to government about the rights of women working in tourism. Because women in tourism are, in the world, I think there are almost 150 million people, if they are half of people, at least when they were working. But now, in any case, there are more than 54% of total workers and more than 70% just in the hospitality. But then they are less than 40% in the managerial positions. For example, in Italy, they are just 14% of managers, etc. And usually they are in
but this underrepresentation, is tied to gender discrimination. And of course, also skills shortage at manager level, or boards are dominated by men, a large gender pay gap, and concentration on lower skills, low paid areas of the sector, because in the informal sector, it's more women working in tourism than in the formal sector. So, but to your opinion, how should gender equality strategies look like so that we can finally change that and fight this discrimination and against women in tourism in a short statement?
Well, you can show slide number 3. Because we were saying once that travels are sexualized, right? So there are problems for women traveling, and sometimes they are scared, they have been assaulted, but it is always a problem of culture. It's a matter of culture, right? And so also in the discussion about women's rights, it is a matter of culture. When we consider women's rights in tourism, we can say that usually we consider labor rights, protection from discrimination, health and safety, and then now with the crisis they are even magnified. But these are a matter of culture, and we should change some. In each country, we should change the mentality, but also the laws and. There are several, of course, projects that we should do.
Thank you. Okay. I want to ask Sandi now, because people in destinations sometimes have issues. With people of color or with homosexuals, but especially women very often. That's what Iaia just mentioned. Face sexism, and they are getting sexualized. But all these experiences are leading to negative travel experiences. So, what would you say? What would be your feedback? Are especially women suffering discrimination in a multiple way, and sometimes even maybe avoid traveling because of that?
It is unfortunate. Women who travel, it's funny, it's actually a podcast I listen to quite frequently through Condé Nast. Women who travel, especially if you're traveling alone, we tend to be targets. And I do a lot of traveling, business trips. And, you tend to be a target, initially. And it's sad because, a lot of people have had to change, the way that their whole entire mindset of traveling. You want to make sure that you're going somewhere safe, and you want to make sure that the halls are well lit, and you want to make sure that, you're in a centralized area, in a well-known area, because the reality is that in the States and in other countries that, women travelers and minority women travelers are direct targets. And as a result, women end up either not traveling, they don't feel safe, they don't feel secure, and it is our job in the tourism industry to make sure that our cities and our countries are safe for women, and that women feel welcomed to be able to travel individually or amongst other women.
Thank you, Sandi. Just speaking about safety, I have to come back to Tobias. Stephanie, I will ask you another question after that, but just because she was just talking about safety. What about where am I safe? The question is a big question for everybody who has faced discrimination when traveling, whether it's because you're disabled or whether you are Black, whether you are Latin American, whether you are, I don't know, LGBT. So is there something, I know that there is a gay travel index. What does that mean? Why is it there and why is it necessary? And how to use it?
Yeah, there are, I think, even more. There's more than one gay travel index, as it is called. There's Spartacus Gay Travel Index. I know it best because I used to work with Spartacus Traveler, the company who set it up for a couple of years, until I think 2 or 3 years ago. And well, basically, that's an index composed of I think 17 categories, and it's redrawn. How do you say that? Redrawn each year, once a year. And these categories, they comprise, for example, is there any anti-discrimination legislation in a certain country? Are there transgender rights? Is there an equal age of consent? But also, are there demonstrations allowed in the countries? What about pride parades? Are they banned as they are in fact in a number of countries? Or if we move away from state legislations and talk about the society at large, maybe are there murders? Is there widespread hostility against LGBT people? Or is there in fact death penalty, as there is in at least 5 countries around the world? And so out of all these categories, they draw a list. And I think for this year, the new index will come out anytime soon. But last year, the top 3 as the most safe countries, they were Canada, Malta, and Sweden. I looked up our countries. Germany is on 10, the United States is on 31, and Italy on 41. That's all pretty high, actually, while at the bottom end there are Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Somalia, as all these countries, for example, have the death penalty in effect.
Thank you. Yeah, Stephanie, last not least, sorry for asking you only now, but I wanted to ask you, you have recently been awarded 2nd place, I saw, in a startup pitch competition for a soon-to-debut online marketplace for cultural heritage tours led by local tour guides. Would you agree that tourists visiting a country should always strive to learn about the local culture, but should also try to explore how members of the own community live in that destination and how they have also shaped this particular culture? Because normally also the minorities shape the culture of a certain place, but normally nobody talks about it. So yeah, I have 2 questions. First of all, this one, but the second question I would also like to ask you, whether you should think there should also be a Black safety guide, as we have the gay travel guide. Do you think that would be necessary as well?
Okay, well, let me tackle the first question first. Thank you for having me. The marketplace that you are referring to is Culture on Shore. It's one of the initiatives that my organization, the National Blacks in Travel and Tourism Collaborative, has been working on to help level the playing field for those very small Black and brown independent tour operators that provide those local, rich, authentic cultural heritage tours and activities and destinations worldwide. So the fact that we needed to create a marketplace or a platform that would drive more tourist foot traffic and dollars into these small businesses to help them be sustainable is telling about our industry. I also am a Black-owned tour operator in South Florida. And so I can attest that it's very challenging for inbound travelers to find out about my tours. And it's across the board for small and Black and brown tour operators throughout the United States, because if they're not on the radar, then they're not generating consistent foot traffic and dollars into their businesses. So it's difficult as a Black person in this industry to build a sustainable business without tourist foot traffic and dollars. So that's the main reason why we developed that platform, and we'll be launching it later this year so that we can level the playing field so that travelers from around the world could find these smaller operators and patronize them. Because the other thing you said, yes, it is very important when travelers are visiting different destinations that, and most travelers do, just based on research, when they do visit destinations, they are seeking to have those local, authentic cultural experiences. They want to go where locals live so they can learn about, the local culture. But the issue that I think we have in the industry, again, is that these smaller businesses and attractions are not amplified through their DMOs or through, again, media. So they're not really able to actively participate and profit in the travel and tourism industry like our white counterparts are. So, and can you repeat question number 2, please?
Yeah, question number 2 was, there's a gay travel index. Do you think it would be necessary to have like a people of color travel index in this world by now? Or
actually, there is something called the Green Book. The Green Book, which was a book that was created many, many years ago for the United States, that listed safe places for Blacks to travel via car, when they were traveling via, around the United States, where they could stay, where they could eat and be safe. Okay. There are several new versions of the Green Book that are now being represented to the industry so that the industry can also, again, find these micro local businesses and within destinations where it's safe, to visit, to stay, to eat, and also to patronize other Black people in the industry, because oftentimes, again, we don't have enough dollars going into these Black businesses. And so travelers who are seeking these experiences are being intentional about wanting to patronize these smaller hotel owners and restaurant owners and local museums and attractions so that, again, we can have more people of color participating and making money in the industry. Mm-hmm. But there are already Green Book style initiatives that are currently on the marketplace to help travelers, and particularly Black travelers, identify other Black businesses and attractions to patronize when they travel.
Mm. I mean, that's good, but I mean, our aim must be really to fight all those stereotypes. I mean, I think we all believe that we have to overcome that, right? So,
Absolutely.
and all minorities travel, if you can call it minorities. Women are no minorities. Muslims are not a minority in the, but all people who are getting discriminated are normally not in any advertisement. They're not reflected, and they don't exist in the tourism industry, as you said. You will not be
Absolutely.
found. Yeah. So,
can I address something you just said, Rika?
Yeah.
You said minorities, and I think language is something that's really important, especially moving forward in our industry, because you're right. People of color, the LGBTQ community, women have always been known as the minority, but we're no longer the minority. I know in the U.S., we're the majority. Yeah. There are more people of color in the United States. And that makes a difference with how the industry should reframe their messaging and how they communicate to people of color, the LGBT community, and women. Yeah. Because now, if you call me a minority, I could become insulted by that. Because I'm not the minority, and the word minority, it really has a racial, overtone that I'm less than, and so I think it's really important in the messaging, the imagery that's used by destinations and everyone in the industry, it's important for you to become educated about the use of language, what's offensive to, different segments of the travel industry. And if you don't know, then you need to seek out people who can help guide you in developing your messaging and identifying imagery that is representation of our world, our diverse world.
Yeah, exactly, because whoever has been called minority normally isn't a minority. But even if you are a minority, like you see, people of, we talk about accessible travel, people who are in a way disabled or other than others, they might be a minority, but still they should not be discriminated. So I think we have to fight on all ends, because okay, LGBT is a minority in comparison to the if it's about 8% of the population, then it is a minority, and women aren't, and people of color aren't for sure. But we all have to fight together against any discrimination, I think. So I totally agree with you. I have a question, how to fight these stereotypes, because there are a lot of stereotypes still in the tourism industry. Things are sold because those who sell them have stereotypes in their minds. And I think that tourism finally needs to smash these negative stereotypes also, because stereotypes are always bad, Like we have the Indigenous Tourism Seminar today, and we talk about it, that Native Americans normally we're always like dancing or drunk, so you always have this negative stereotype. But these narratives, they really have to be changed, because I believe that tourism can do better and break those stereotypes. So I want to ask Sandi, unfortunately, there are still all kinds of these stereotypes, and you never see people who are discriminated, those, not minorities, reflected in tourism advertisements. They are not at all represented. Also, as Black Americans, Latino Americans, it's an important target group. So why are they not finally shown in the ads? And the same applies to LGBT community members, How can tourism do better? What can tour operators or what can hoteliers do? I mean, you're in hotelier, you work in the hospitality industry. Are there any best practices? Can you give us some hope?
It starts with education. It really starts with education. And so many people have implemented DEI segments into their businesses. And I strongly agree that this is so needed. As Stephanie just mentioned, wording and how you're approaching certain situations. Tobias mentioned, his and hers. That's not the reality of our world. And people they don't know what they don't know. And that is the problem. So many people are so uneducated about the world and who actually resides in it. So many people don't understand when they see an ad that just has, a white man and a white woman, that does not represent your travelers. That does not represent the community that ultimately is regardless spending money with you. And even with my property, my graphics designer, when he sends me something, I send it back and I'm like, I want to see X, Y, and Z represented in the same ad. We can have the same ad, but having multiple representation, multiple people represented, because that's what's important. And you do have to hire people. You have to hire consultants and say, tell me how I can make my brand better. Tell me how I can be a better person in the world, and how I can speak to everyone and seem, more inclusive and just be more inclusive. So representation is so important. Everyone is spending dollars, and but they spend more when they see themselves represented.
Thank you. I also want to pass that question to Stephanie. How do you think we could change the narrative? I mean, what your organization is doing, maybe you can tell us a little bit about your organization, because they're also doing a great job.
Thank you. And I also agree with Sandi. I'm learning that people don't know what they don't know. But when you know better, then that means you need to do better, okay? And so the work that we do around advancing Blacks in travel and tourism, because we have been underrepresented in every facet of travel and tourism. And so we're trying to change that dynamic to make certain that there is Black representation across the board, serving on boards, in executive leadership positions, in adventure travel, in these different segments of travel where you typically don't see Black people working or operating businesses. And so I think acknowledging that change must happen in our industry, and I've seen a lot of that, fortunately. But once you acknowledge, then it requires, as Sandi said, to become educated about the lack of diversity, equity, and inclusion within your own organization and company, because you have to start there. You must address it within your organization, and then you also need to address it externally within your destinations. And so if you don't know how to do that, then yes, you need to hire someone that can help you do that. We actually just launched a DEI masterclass for the industry, that really helps each employee, each board member, to become, spend time self-reflecting on DEI and on their own personal challenges or issues around racism and diversity and inclusion. So it's important to have these internal and external conversations, but it's also equally important to be intentional about taking action to make certain that change is sustainable, because we could talk about it, but if there's no action to follow up with it, and if it's not really planned to be long-term change, then it's not going to be sustainable. And our hope is that when the industry fully rebounds, that we will all have done the work or started doing the work to make certain that our industry is diverse, inclusive, and equitable for everyone who wants to be a part of it.
Yeah, I think it's a good chance to use this time now, really. That's the point.
This is our window of opportunity. It really is.
I want to come back to women. Yeah. So what do you think? Which are the best practices? I mean, what should women, especially because you care about gender responsible tourism? So what would be your advice? What is the best practice to change things?
I can give you a few examples in a couple of lines each of people that I have been talking to lately. Because for sure we cannot say that women are minority, since they are more than half, and they are also crucial, especially in this moment. For example, you can see in slide 5, please. In my investigation, I have met Trauma Cole, Equality in Tourism, and she made a study about tourism, business, human rights, and gender equality in Indonesia with a very interesting seminar you can find on the website. And
she actually received an award today.
Exactly, and they have explained all about gender and responsible tourism. Very, very interesting, the speech they made. So I invite everybody to go back and look for that in their website. And I am actually related with them. So anyway, for example, she says, she noted a very interesting thing, that women workers' rights in tourism are more unsteady for women because they face discrimination, stereotyping, harassment, etc., as I said before. But then another interesting thing is that the rights are very much linked one to another. And she makes the example of water, and she says that the girls going looking for water, then they cannot be educated or go to school, and then they have more danger of violence. And these things are also related to work in tourism. So you see, it's a matter of culture, it's a matter of where you live, it's a matter of laws. And then, for example, another interesting example has been made by Sophie Hartmann, of Institut Européen de Coopération et Développement. They made a nice work with asset and plan in the Mekong region, and they made a vocational training, and they saw that they had to push women to to be more definite, more conscious about their career. But then when they go back to their rural life and their small towns, etc., they are back to stereotypes. And more than that, now that with this crisis, the industry are not looking for women managers, but again, they went back looking for soft skills and women doing a little bit of everything. So back to square one. But a very interesting solution I can mention has been proposed by the Roundtable of Human Rights in Tourism, which is a multi-stakeholders initiative promoting human rights in tourism that you know very well because ITB is a member of them. And Iaia told me that, for example, they started to help companies to assess gender-specific human rights during the pandemic. And they have identified a list of frequent human rights gender-related risks. And also, they set measures to be taken by tourism operators. So you see, it's really a matter that has been raised up in so many different situations, and we should really start realizing
and we need the support. I mean, we need the whole supply chain. We need the support of the governments, of policymakers, of NGOs, you know, associations. Yeah, maybe just one quick, because we really run out of time. Sandi, there's right now, we have the Black Travel Foundation, we have the Black Travel Alliance, National Blacks in Travel and Tourism Collaborative, we heard, and so on. There's a round table of human rights you mentioned in tourism. And to your opinion, what is the role of such associations? Is that a very important role? I mean, in your opinion?
Yes, definitely. It is. I think that, you know, having representation, again, everything really goes back to representation, and who you're having on your boards and who you're having and who you're putting in you know, at the table. And I think, you know, once we are able to diversify the tables, then really, you know, that's when things can really happen and start to change. Because, you know, to have a table and you think about the different people that are at your table, if they all look the same, then you're probably going to have pretty similar opinions. But once you diversify that and you have, you know, Asian Americans, you have LGBTQ+, you have African American women, and you have African American men. Once you start to diversify your table, then that's when you'll truly be able to hear more from the people, and not just one sector. One sector.
Thank you. I'm sorry, we are live, so we have to interrupt. I would love to go on discussing with you because the subject is so important, and I'm sure we will continue because, as I said, we have human rights on our agenda at ITB. And thank you very much for being with us. We will keep that discussion going, and we will fight discrimination. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Rika,
thank you.
Rika, can I just say that with Equality, we launched a call to action to all the women in tourism.
Maybe you can write it in the chat, and
you can find it exactly in Equality in Tourism or in Gender Responsible Tourism. My website is slide number 10 if they want to show it. But of course, each of you working in tourism is invited to come and look for that. It's a call to action. We want gender impact assessments everywhere.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much, all of you. It was so nice to have you. And we continue, as I said. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.